Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm in Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 4, 5, and 6 of Fire Emblem, The Binding Blade. It's amazing that after 25 episodes, I still don't know how to follow that up and actually start the goddamn episode. How's everyone doing today? I hope you all had a wonderful holiday and a happy new year as well. 2023 is upon us. Looking forward to it, hoping it's going to be a pretty good year, and I hope the same of you as well. Let's do the question, because I just thought of a good one. So, last time I asked you guys, what game is your favorite in terms of how it handles supports in the series? And I got a pleasant variety of responses. Let me go through a couple of them real quick. At Biozilla says, well, I've only played 9 Fire Emblems, so I have limited knowledge, but I'm a fan of how in FE4 units would converse in response to events of a chapter as they arise. If we could get more of these chapter-specific combos on top of more standard supports, that would be great. I also really like that about FE4. I do think that the support system is in some ways a step down from what they did in FE4, because having characters react to events as they unfold, I think, is huge and really added some nice flavor to that game and added a little depth to the characters. I thought it was really neat, and most of them were optional, so if you didn't want to bother them, you didn't have to. The closest they ever got to replicating that was FE9, because Fire Emblem 9 does have supports that kind of reflect the story. Some supports reflect the story. So, like, if an important character dies, that'll be reflected in some supports, like in the story, not one of the playable characters, unfortunately, but there's a lot of, like, unique dialogue depending on events that happen in FE9, so I really like that, and I'm excited to get there and talk about it a little bit. At Super User Person says, even if it's not the best mechanically, I'm partial to the writing of 6's supports. Mechanically, maybe 12. I think some of the later games almost bog you too much down in those supports. That is fair. I am of two minds on this. I think that the support limit in most games of only being able to support up to 5 characters is really annoying, and I don't like it. I kind of wish they just took it out and had another system in place for these games. But on the other hand, I also don't think that every character should be able to support every character, so I'm inclined to say either 9, FE9, or FE, 13 Fates. FE13, FE14. I guess the closest they get with that is 3 Houses. I think that's a pretty sound answer. Three Houses has probably my favorite support system in the series. And I also do like how there's like C+ supports and B+ supports. So some characters can have like more than 3 supports in their chain. Some characters only go up to B. Some characters have like a C+ and then a B, but that's weird because why would they not just have an A at that point? I don't know. But I think that the 3 Houses' willingness to write the support to what the pairing demands rather than forcing every pairing to kind of fit into the same mold is cool, and I like that. So I'm going to say 3 Houses for that one. But in response to Super User Person's comment, I mean, I don't remember enough of 6's writing to say what I think about them. I mean, 12 is very similar to 9, mechanically. It's just, I don't think there's a 5 support limit in 12, but most characters only have 1 support partner anyway, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. So, this next question is not Fire Emblem related, but it is timely. What I want to know is, do you guys have any New Year's resolutions? And if so, if you feel like sharing, what are they? If you don't have any, that's fine. I don't really have any off the top of my head. I mean, maybe I will by the time the next episode comes out, but make one up. Try to make a joke out of it. That would be funny. I'd read that. But yeah, either serious or joking. I'm curious what you guys are hoping to do with yourselves in 2023. New year, new me, as they say, right? So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Okay, now I believe that's everything that I had to talk about. So without further ado, we can go ahead and start talking about Chapter 4, which is called Crumbling League. So Roy is on his way to Ostia, and in order to get to Ostia, he has to pass through a place called Laos. And Laos is currently in cahoots with Byrne. They are working together. Byrne is kind of, I think there's a few different areas, but Byrne, or Laos specifically is the first one we see, that is actually colluding with Byrne to kind of bring down the Lycian League from within. This is the first hint that we see that, like, not all is well. The Lycian League is not a completely united front, and I think Byrne is really taking advantage of that. I mean, they could just, like, go in and storm and beat, like, they took over Ilya and Sakai by force, although in both of those cases I think something similar happened, but I think it's neat that they're kind of exemplifying, like, hey, you know, some of the, like, not all of these places are working together, some of them have their own ulterior motives, some of these guys are just straight up bad people. In this case, there's the leader of Laos, who is named Eric, and he is currently meeting with one of the Wyvern generals who we met last chapter named Narshian. And this is where he went during chapter 3. He said he was going to get a prize from some, I don't remember what he said, but basically this is where he headed off to, because Eric has captured a noble woman of Etruria named Clarine. And Clarine is being given away to Narshian as kind of a slave. I don't. There's no other real way to like a forced bride, I guess, if you want to be a little bit more gentle about it. But he is going to basically take her with him, and she is not having any of that. She honestly, she's kind of a girl boss here. I kind of respect it. She is not like. She's just. I'm going to talk a little about Clarine in another episode, obviously in one of the support episodes, but I don't really care for her too much in general. I'll say that much, at least from what I recall. But this scene, she kind of rocks it, and I really appreciate that. She's just like, she doesn't have any patience for this. She's not like scared or worried. She's just like, no, fuck off. Don't like you. Don't want you at all. She makes fun of him. Says that compared to her brother, is the first time she's bringing up her brother. He's like nothing, basically. And Narshian is a very prideful and boastful man, so he kind of gets upset by that, and basically says, alright, well, I don't remember, I think he says, like, I'll be back for you later, basically. As Roy is approaching, they realize that something bad's going on, and they attack, basically. The build-up to this chapter, on Roy's end of things, is not very noteworthy. They just kind of fight. The thing about this chapter is that it is definitely, I would say, the first tricky chapter in the game. Chapters 1, 2, and 3 are all really, really easy and boring. This one is a little bit more interesting. You start off on the right, and you need to make your way to the castle to the left. Now, there are a lot of Cavaliers in this map, and Cavaliers are hard to deal with in this game. They're tanky, they're pretty strong, they're, like, not super evasive and fast, but, like, decently so. They have really high maneuverability, so if you leave one of your weaker characters exposed, there's a good chance that they'll get attacked, and you might have to deal with that. On hard mode, this is probably one of the only chapters, especially in the early game, where Roy actually gets to do stuff because he has the rapier, which is something I didn't actually talk about, I don't think, when I did his gameplay review, but basically, Roy has a rapier, like many other Fire Emblem characters, or Fire Emblem lords throughout the series. He has a rapier that is super effective on, Armor Knights and Cavaliers, yeah, duh. And they actually changed how effective weapons work in this game, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they work like this in 6, or 5, rather. In 6, if you have a weapon that is effective against an enemy, so in this case the rapier against an Armor Knight or a Cavalier, its might stat is tripled. So, I don't remember what the rapier has, but if it has like 6 might or 8 might or something like that, it gets tripled to, let's say, 24 if it has 8 might. And then you add Roy's strength on top of that as normal. So, it's not quite the same as a crit, but it can potentially be much, much deadlier. Wait. Yeah, it's much, much deadlier than a crit. Because it doesn't just multiply the damage you're doing, it's multiplying like the damage before their defense stat gets detracted from it, basically. So with the rapier, Roy can actually do some damage to these guys, which is noteworthy because not a lot of characters can. Lot and Wade are really inaccurate. Lou and Chad either don't do... They're really frail, and Chad like barely does any damage. Boris gets doubled by a lot of these guys, especially on hard mode, so he's not really going to be able to tank them too well, and he's also pretty inaccurate. Alan and Lance are okay, but they can only, they're only 2 guys against, a swarm of, 6 of these guys. There's Marcus, who does pretty well, Deke, who does pretty well, Shanna, who does okay, but she's also pretty frail. So you don't really have a lot of good options for taking these guys down. So you do actually have to really consider who you're going to be using, especially since Deke is probably better served in the bottom, because eventually there also are going to be some pirate reinforcements that come up and try to sack some villages. If you send a sword unit to intercept them, it should be no problem. But just don't take too... They show up pretty late into the map, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But if you spend too much time having Deke fight these Cavaliers, then he won't be able to stop those guys. I guess Chad can do it too, but that makes me nervous, so I don't usually do it with Chad. Oh, and it's also worth noting that in this game only, well, at least for the GBA games, nomads, the bow archers, or the horseback archers, do not count as cavaliers for the purposes of the rapier's damage modification. So it just does normal effective damage, or normal damage to nomads, the rapier, that is. In 7 and 8, it works properly and actually applies damage to all horseback units equally. There are a lot of interesting choke points in this map. There is a cliff kind of up to the north that you can use to block off some guys, or have Lou shoot some fireballs down from a ledge that they can't attack back from. There are some bridges near the start that if you're playing very conservatively and you don't want to overextend, you can have them come to you and fight you on those bridges. But then also, you need to be able to get out enough to have Deke or someone kill the pirates before they loot the villages. So there's a few options you have here, and I actually like this chapter quite a bit. It's basic. It's still very much an early game chapter. It's not anything to definitely write home about, but as far as early game chapters go, I'd say this is pretty good. Now, a few turns into the map, there are a few events. I'm just going to talk about them back to back. These happen a couple turns apart. But basically, the first thing that happens is that Clarine is in her cell. She's being held captive by Eric. A mystery man approaches her and basically frees her and says, you're free to go. Clarine asks him why he's doing this, and he says, I have a score to settle with Byrne, or something to that effect. He doesn't like Byrne. When he does this, Clarine enters the field as a green unit. Now, an interesting thing to note about Clarine in this chapter is that she will not be attacked by the enemies. She starts off behind enemy lines, basically. So if you were able to, if the enemies went after her, it would be very unfair, and she would just die immediately, unless you were, playing very aggressively. So, they don't attack her. Now, the interesting thing about that is that carries over when she's a blue unit. So if you recruit her, which you do by talking to her with Roy, and you could just send her right into enemy lines and she will not get attacked. That's very helpful for a reason that we're going to talk about in just a second. But for now, let's just talk about Clarine. So Clarine is a troubadour. She is a horseback healer, basically. She is pretty good. She gets the job done. She heals. She is on horseback. She's better than Ellen just for that reason alone, probably. On promotion, she does get anima magic, which is not... you're going to be mostly using her for stabs anyway. Her growth rates aren't, crazy good, I don't think. So she's, she's fine. She's nothing particularly special. I like using Ellen more, personally. I'm partial to clerics over troubadours, generally speaking, but, in terms of raw gameplay advantage, Clarine is the pretty obvious choice, I would say, especially since we're getting another footlocked healer soon who is much, much better than Ellen. So, Ellen fans can't catch a break here, unfortunately, so, but it is what it is. I'll keep using Ellen anyway, though. Clarine's pretty fun to use. I enjoy using her sometimes. Sometimes I'll go with Clarine and Ellen as my main healers. Or sometimes I won't even use Ellen. I played this game a handful of times. I don't know exactly how many, but I definitely have used Clarine before, and it was a lot of fun, so don't regret it at all. So she's helpful a lot, definitely. She can heal, make sure that your frontline units like Marcus, Alan, Lance are staying topped off and that they don't get seriously hurt. A couple turns after she appears on the battlefield, Eric will order this mystery man who freed her to go and fight on the battlefield. Now, he is also a recruitable character. His name is Rutger, and he is recruited by talking to him with Clarine. And the reason that I mentioned Clarine being, enemies not going after her is that it makes recruiting Rutger much easier, which is very good because Rutger... Let's talk about Rutger for a second. So, he's one of the most infamous things in FE6. He, if you've played, he's so early, and a lot of people, maybe stop playing after the first few chapters, but a lot of people have seen Rutger. He is what is called a same turn reinforcement, or an ambush reinforcement, they're sometimes called. And I don't think I've talked about this before, because it's never really been relevant. I think they were in Thracia too, so maybe I brought it up before. But basically, there's a whole debate in the community about same-term reinforcements, their pros, their cons, etc., etc. Generally, the cons are, they're pretty obvious, right? Like, being able to spawn enemies and, like, have them attack on the same turn is kind of bullshit. You didn't know that they were coming, so how were you supposed to know that, you needed to move your healer away from there, or you needed to move your dancer away? It can be frustrating to just get jumped out of nowhere and to not have anything you can do about it. So I get that. For a long time, I was very, very against ambush reinforcements. I still am. I think. I think I still come down on the no, don't do them side, but I'm unsure because the pros are pretty noteworthy as well. Namely, that they're actually difficult and challenging because enemies that spawn on the player phase, I don't really have a chance to do anything, especially if you already know they're there. It's really easy to just walk up and kill them before they even have a chance to do anything. So, I'm a little bit torn. I do think that, in general, it's not good to force the player to react to information that they didn't have. Basically, you can't act on information you don't have. So, generally, I think it's important to give the player as much information as possible. That's why I think it's best when games kind of come to a compromise, which many of the especially more recent games have done, where they will kind of give you a hint about maybe when the reinforcements are going to show up, where they'll show up, what kinds of units they'll be, etc., etc. So that's probably a good compromise between the two. And overall, I think that they're mostly okay. If you telegraph them well enough, and especially, this is kind of cheating. I don't think that this is, a good reason, but if you're me and you've played every game 6 times, you know where all the ambush reinforcements are. You might forget about them every once in a while. You might not remember specific ones, but you're generally prepared for most of them, and it's not that hard to just be prepared for them. I know that these games generally, I'm especially for a strategy game, I'm not an advocate of saying oh well, on subsequent playthroughs, they're there. So that's cheap. That's kind of, the player playing that game for the first time can't make a good strategy involving that. So I don't think it really counts. I just figured it's worth mentioning because that's probably why I've softened on them so much. When I was new to the series and I was playing games for the first time, shit like this really caught me off guard, and I was very much oh, fuck ambush reinforcements, I hate them. I never want to see them again. I still think that a lot of them are bullshit, but I've softened on them a lot recently, and I actually felt the same way about Fog of War, and I haven't softened on Fog of War. I think Fog of War is just fucking stupid, and that they should get rid of it, and that it should never be in any other game ever again. Now, the reason that this is relevant now is that Rutger shows up here as an ambush spawn, and that by itself is already a little bullshit, as we've just discussed. But what makes it even worse is that he has a killing edge. So there is a fairly significant chance that he shows up, walks up to one of your units, and either just kills them outright or crits them, and you need to reset because of that. He's also, if you're playing on hard mode, he gets hard mode bonuses, which I'll talk about. I'll explain what that is in a minute. And they are on hard mode, he is considered maybe the best unit in the entire game. He's really, really, really strong on hard mode, and it makes it all the more likely that he's just going to kill one of your units if you don't get to him on turn 1. Now, what Clarine can do is that she can just walk up and talk to him and doesn't have to worry about him or any of the guys that are with him. Rutger has to worry about the guys that are with him, so you shouldn't just recruit them all willy-nilly, but it definitely gives you a lot more flexibility in how you can handle that recruitment, so that's good. I kind of dipped into it a little bit, but let's start talking about how Rutger is. So, Rutger is a Myrmidon. He is the edgy sword master of this game, the Navarre, if you will. And he is the prime example of how FE6 differs from other games. So if you look at a character like Joshua from FE8, or Guy from FE7, or Zehark from Path of Radiance, right? These are all games where, I've talked about before, they are enemy phase focused games where most of the fighting happens on enemy phase. Enemies will suicide off of you. You can comfortably have strong units deal with dozens of enemies on their turns and not suffer any consequences from that. In those circumstances, it's very useful to have characters that can use hand axes, javelins, anything that can attack at 1-2 range, so that no matter what kind of enemy comes up to them, they will be able to kill them. And historically, in many of those games, the Myrmidons have suffered. Same as the archers, although to a less extreme extent. Myrmidons can only attack at 1 range. So, well, for the most part, I mean, you can have like a light brand or a rune sword, but those aren't common enough to really be, or powerful enough, really, to be worth talking about. So, if you are Guy on a level of FE7, and, you're trying to take out like 10 fighters, and maybe you take out like 4 of them, but the rest of them survive because they attacked you with hand axes, right? It's frustrating, and it makes you take way longer to take people out than you otherwise would. Rutger, on the other hand, is excellent, because FE6 is a player phase focus game, where enemies are stronger, you cannot as comfortably fight on enemy phase reliably against multiple units, so being able to quickly and efficiently take out units proactively becomes a lot more important. And Rutger is very good at that. He joins with C-rank swords, or it might even be B-rank swords. He has pretty solid base stats on normal mode, and on hard mode he has very, very good base stats because of a thing called hard mode bonuses. If you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like, basically, on hard mode, enemies get stat bonuses because, that's usually how hard modes work. And because Rutger is a recruitable enemy, he also gets those bonuses. Now, it would be that simple, except for the fact that not every character who is a recruitable enemy gets hard mode bonuses. Only some of them do. And for a while, I had no idea what the connection there was. And then I figured it out. For whatever reason, the hard mode bonuses only apply to characters who come in partway through a map. And it's why characters like Rutger get hard mode bonuses, and characters like Ray from Chapter 12 don't, because Ray is there from the very start of the map. Rutger comes in as a reinforcement partway through. For a particularly funny example, you could look at Milady from Chapter 13, where she's not on the map, like, at all. And then she leaves the castle to go find Roy as an enemy. And because she's an enemy for like 5 seconds, even though she flies to Roy and talks to him and immediately recruits herself, so she's never actually an enemy in gameplay. Because the game recognized her as a red unit who joined partway through the map, she gets hard mode bonuses, and it's why she's considered collectively to be the best unit in the game, but I'm getting ahead of myself, we still have a while before we get there. Rutger is very much the same way. He is an actual enemy, though, so it makes a little bit more sense. He's also really good on hard mode because some of the tougher bosses are, they're strong and they're difficult to take out. Rutger is fast. He can outspeed and double a lot of them that most of your other units could not do in their wildest dreams. He is accurate. He can hit way more reliably than someone like Marcus with a lance, or absolutely like Wade or a lot with an axe or anything like that. And he has a lot of crit, not just from being a swordmaster if he promotes, because swordmasters get innate crit in this game. He also gets some from his supports. The common support triangle that you can get him, it's really comically high crit. I think some builds you can actually get him to over 100 crit. He supports with Chlorine and Deke. I think that they both give him crit, and he also gets crit just from being a swordmaster. And you can use like a Killing Edge or a Shamshir or something like that. Or sorry, a Wodao in this game. He's really strong, and there are some bosses on hard mode particularly the boss of Chapter 8X comes to mind, and also probably a couple others, that are incredibly unreliable to kill with any other unit other than Rucker. And that's why he is considered by many to be the second best unit in the game, behind Melody. I guess also maybe Percival, but we'll talk about that another time. Considering how early he joins and how he does what so few other characters can do at a point where your roster is very limited, I would say he's probably the second best character in the game. I know Percival is great and all, but I know that's just my personal preference. Anyway, I don't really plan on using him. On normal mode, he's still fine. Like, he's not bad by any means. I don't really have any interest in him. The killing bosses is way better, although the boss of Chapter 8X is still very strong even on normal mode, which is kind of scary if you think about it, but yeah, he's pretty good. I enjoy using him when I do. I'm not going to be using him long term this time, though. And yeah, that's about it. Once you recruit Rucker, you just make sure you take out the pirates, you get some items from the villages. I'm pretty sure this chapter has an angelic robe in one of the villages, so make sure you pick that up. And then you kill Eric, you seize the castle, and the chapter ends. Basically, the end of this chapter is pretty short. Basically, Roy just kind of talks a little bit about how the bonds of the Lycian Empire are kind of failing, did I just call it the Lycian Empire? The Lycian League are failing and aren't as strong as they once were, etc., etc., and how he wants to repair them, basically. And then Guinevere shows up and they talk a little bit about how, her opinions on what Zephiel's doing, and basically she kind of says, like, alright, I really don't like what Zephiel's doing. I'm going to be on your side because Zephiel is wrong, and I don't much care for how he's treating people. So, she basically pledges fully to, not literally. She just kind of, voices her disdain for Zephiel, which she hadn't done up to this point. And that's about the end of the chapter. So, not bad overall. Story-wise, it's pretty basic. It highlights a few interesting ideas, but it just doesn't really go anywhere with them. That's fine. It's not the end of the world. They're going to explore it a little bit more in the coming chapters, but still not a lot. Still not as much as I would like. It's okay, though. It's not a huge deal. Okay. Next up, we have Chapter 5, which is called The Fire Emblem. Wow, that's the final chapter. I can't believe it came so fast. It's crazy, guys. Five chapter Fire Emblem. So, despite the name, this chapter has filler chapter written all over it in terms of the plot. It's very bare bones, very basic. Basically, Roy is continuing his journey to Ostia, and he is passing through a mountain pass to get there, and there are some bandits there that have taken over a local castle, and they want to kill Roy. That's it. That's the entire plot. Now, there are a couple of miscellaneous things to mention here, and then there's a lot of stuff going on at the end of the chapter, but we'll get to all of that. But that's really the gist of the introduction. So, in terms of how this map plays, it's kind of interesting. You have two ways that you can approach this. You can either go directly left from your starting position, because the castle that you need to capture is actually pretty close to your starting position. However, there is a gate blocking your path. If you walk up to the gate with any unit, if you end a unit's turn adjacent to that gate, the gate will open. And all the bandits and mercenaries and archers and nomads and all of them just start coming at you from the left side. That can be pretty good if you want to end the chapter kind of quickly, but on the other hand, it can be a little overwhelming if you don't have strong units. And at this point, you don't have a lot of good combat juggernauts. Even on normal mode, Marcus is good, but he can't do everything. The Christmas Cavaliers are good, but they can't do everything. And past that, who else are you really going to use here? Boars can maybe take a couple hits, but for the most part, it's really just going to be those three, and that's a lot of enemies for them to take on all by themselves. You can ship with Walt or with Lou or whoever, but that is a viable option. It just comes with some risks. The second way you can do things is you can go all the way up and around the mountains and come down from the northern side of the castle, and that's also a viable option. Obviously it takes much, much, much longer, but the enemies there are fewer. They're, I wouldn't say less strong. They're all around the same stat build, but most of them are fighters that you can cheese pretty easily with your sword guys on forts. There's a lot more terrain to take advantage of, so it's a little bit more of a fair fight, I guess you could say. There's also a village in this map that gives you the Gance Lance, which is a unique weapon. It doesn't have any special properties or anything. It's just a fun named weapon that is kind of a middle ground between an Iron Lance and a Steel Lance. It's more powerful than a Iron Lance and less powerful than a Steel Lance, but in terms of weight, it's in the middle of both of them. I think also accuracy, it's in the middle of both of them. So it's a good intermediary step. It has like 50 uses, I think, or 40 uses. So it's a good weapon to give to someone like Shanna, who's maybe a little bit too, thin, or a little bit too, tiny, to double with a Steel Lance yet, but still wants the extra little bit of punch because the Iron Lances just aren't cutting it anymore. It's worth considering. It's definitely something worth picking up. So no matter how you choose to approach this map, it's a little tricky. I wouldn't say it's like super hard or anything, but there are a couple places where you're probably going to run into problems. I split my army. I sent one group up and around to get the Gance Lance and to get more experience and all that stuff. And then I had my main combat units down, and I guess Deke is also there. Deke can help. But I had Deke go with the upper right group. So I had my main combat units kind of fighting in the gate. And yeah, overall, it wasn't too bad, and I was able to push through and get to the castle gate eventually. At the end of the first turn, there is a cutscene in which a few characters are introduced. There's Bishop Yoder. Father Yoder is how he's referred to, but he is dressed in very fancy-looking religious garb, and he's talking to someone named Dorothy. You don't really get a sense of what they're talking about, at least immediately. Yoder leaves, and it's just Dorothy, and she's looking for a guy by the name of Saul. It cuts to Saul hitting on a woman, basically. He's the womanizer character of this game, kind of like Homer, although not canonically although for all I know, but, and Dorothy kind of like reprimands him. They kind of there's a little bit of banter there about Dorothy being ugly or whatever. It's not, honestly, I don't really like their character dynamic all that much. It's supposed to be funny, but it just doesn't land for me. Anyway, Dorothy tells Saul that they're supposed to be joining up with Roy. Yoder has apparently ordered them to join Roy. Although Saul seems much more interested in the fact that Guinevere is with them, and Guinevere is apparently supposed to be a beauty of some renown. They don't join in this map, though. We actually have to wait. They get introduced in this map, but we don't see them at all until the end of the chapter, so that's just for story purposes. The rest of the map progresses pretty easily. There are some reinforcements that you can either block off or kill, and yeah, I mean, that's basically it. However, there is one thing that's really worth noting about this map, and that is that the boss is extremely scary. The boss's name is Dory, and he has a killer axe. And it's very, very hard to kill this guy. Now, there is a way to do it easily, and if you don't care about wasting a whole bunch of turns, then you can bait out him using his hand axe to attack someone who isn't going to get hit, most likely. And then you can just keep attacking him in close quarters, where he'll use his hand axe, which is much worse than his killer axe, and then rescue the person out so that he never switches back to his killer axe. It's a pretty easy way to cheese it. But it takes longer, so if you're actually trying to do this in somewhat of a hurry, it's going to be a gamble, basically, no matter what. I think the only reliable way to kill him, he's pretty strong, too. The only reliable way to kill him immediately is to use, I think, like Rucker with the killing edge or something like that. Maybe Deke can do it, too. Probably not on hard mode. And then even then, there's a chance that you don't crit, and then he just crits you back. So it's probably better to play it safe and to kill him while he's using the hand axe, either with Rucker or Marcus or something. Whatever you choose. Just be cautious, because he is notorious as a difficulty spike for the early chapters of this game. And yeah, that's it. Really basic chapter. Not a whole lot going on here in terms of the plot. At least not until we capture the village. Capture the castle. This ending cutscene introduces Saul to Roy. Saul shows up, and actually he doesn't want to talk to Roy, he wants to talk to Guinevere. And he basically point blank asks Guinevere, where is the Fire Emblem? You have it with you, I'm pretty sure. And Guinevere admits it, and she says that she stole it so that she can give it to Roy, basically. She hasn't handed it over yet, and hasn't made it clear, but apparently that was the plan, because supposedly the Fire Emblem is able to awaken a sword that can kill dragons. And she wants to be able to kill Zephiel's dragons. So she was holding on to it in case Roy needed to awaken that sword. But she hadn't said anything yet, but I guess Saul figured it out, or the church figured it out, and he was sent to confirm what actually happened. And Guinevere says, I have a plan to use it. I want to end this war. And Saul says, okay, in that case, I'm going to accompany you on your journey just to make sure that everything goes okay. And Roy agrees. So, yeah, that's all there is to it. It's not even really that, like, there's not a lot going on here in terms of the Fire Emblem. It's just, it is a little bit of exposition. It's a little bit of nice characterization for Saul. He's very, I guess, he comes across as pretty calculating in the scene. Like, he puts on a lot of flowery language, but ultimately when it comes down to it, he can cut straight to the heart of the matter and knows when to be no nonsense when it counts. Anyway, besides that, there's really nothing else to talk about in this chapter. It is the definition of a filler chapter. There is no reason that this couldn't have been put at the end of last chapter or the beginning of this chapter, or the beginning of next chapter. You could have just cut this whole chapter. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's not bad or anything. It's just so, I guess, blatantly filler in a way that, most chapters in this game are not, except maybe like the first one. I don't know. Anyway, that's enough for me. We can move on, I think, unless I'm missing something, but I don't think I am. The next chapter is chapter 6, which is called Ensnared. The opening narration explains that on his way to Ostia, Roy has decided to stay and rest in a place called Thria, which is on the way. However, it also suggests that there might be a trap going on here, although it doesn't give any specific details. Now, the first thing that happens after the opening narration is that we're given battle preps, so we know there's going to be a battle of some kind here. Battle preps in this game are interesting. This is the first chapter we've had access to them, if you haven't noticed. But it's all the standard stuff you would expect. You can deploy your units, organize your items, save, do any extra stuff, things like that. There is an armory that you can access through the preps menu, but I'm pretty sure that armory gets taken out on hard mode. I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't usually use it anyway, but just keep that in mind if that's something that you care about. Regardless, it's nice to finally have them. I always hate when we don't get battle preps because it doesn't let me organize my units the way that I want to, and I would have very much liked certain arrangements to be different in some of the earlier chapters. But no use crying over spilled milk. We have it now, and that's really all that matters. So once you're all set with the battle preps, the actual conflict of the map starts. I don't remember if this is like a standard thing. This is the last chapter that we're playing this episode, but I don't remember whether or not they do this all the time. The battle preps come before the actual explanation of what the conflict is, which I'm pretty sure it's not like that in most other games. I don't remember it being like that in FE5, although I could be mistaken about that. I don't really remember, to be honest, but anyway, it's what's going on here. We know that there's going to be a battle and how we're going to be arranged before any of that stuff even happens, and the catalyst for the conflict is that there is a thief who is sneaking around the castle. We don't know her name right this minute, but I'll just refer to her by name because we will know it soon enough. Her name is Kath. And Kath is sneaking around the castle looking for some treasure when she overhears one of the guys who works in the castle. His name is Wagner, and he is I think he was like an advisor or something to the guy who's supposed to live here. I think it was like one of Hector's uncles or cousins or brother or something like that. No, not his brother. So, I don't remember, but he's related to Hector in some way. But the lord of the castle, Hector's relative, was killed by this Wagner guy, as, exchange for Byrne doing some stuff for him or whatever. He's just kind of generic evil bad guy, and now he wants to kill Roy as well, and or capture them and hand them over to Byrne, one way or the other. He also mentions that he has somebody known as the Silver Wolf's granddaughter, and we don't know what that means, but I just figured I'd mention it, because they do here. Then we cut to Roy, and Roy is already starting to suspect that something is up. He's not 100% sure what it is. I think he's skeptical that, no matter, they've asked a whole bunch of times to meet the Lord of the Castle, and they keep saying no, he's not well, he can't meet with you. Roy's starting to feel like something's going on. Kath then shows up and warns them, says, hey, this is a trap, you better get out of here while you still can. Merlinus doubts this because, she's just some random girl. Why would she know what any of this is about? But Roy actually doesn't do what I would have expected him to do. So typically in situations like this, at least from what I remember, in most Fire Emblem games, the protagonist just kind of goes with whatever the person is telling him, like, oh, they must be telling the truth, we're going to listen to them, yada yada. Roy doesn't go for that right away. Instead of just taking what she's saying at face value, he decides to come up with a plan to figure it out. In this case, what he decides to do is basically pretend like they're leaving, and if they let them go on their merry way, great, and if not, then they know something, like it would force their hand, they would know something is up. So it was a pretty cool plan. It's a good piece of strategy from Roy here that I respect. Now, of course, that's exactly what happens. Roy tells Wagner that he is leaving, and Wagner tries to convince him to stay, but it doesn't work. And he says, well, in that case, I'm going to have to spring my trap on you and make you stay by force. And that's how the chapter begins. Now, there are a few different paths to take through this map. You're at the bottom, you want to get to the top. There is a kind of courtyard in the middle that you can cut through, and then there's also a path on the left and a path on the right. The right and left paths have various locked doors in a whole bunch of different places. You need a lot of lockpick uses to get through this map. So I believe, I'm trying to remember, there are 8 rooms with locked doors. 3 of them, no, I was right. 4 of them lead to treasure. 1 of them leads to a recruitable character. But then the other 3 don't lead to anything. It just leads to enemies, which honestly is kind of cool. I like the idea of, well, there's a whole bunch of locked doors here. People are gonna assume that there's something good behind them, so let's put in a little trap to get them. And I think the most 2 of the 3 with enemies behind them are pretty early. Although I think they actually, the ones they come as ambush reinforcements. I think. I don't remember. I never open those doors anymore because I know there's nothing in there. But they're along the bottom of the map. I think you open them and there's no one in there. But then, like the turn after you open them or something, some ambush reinforcements come out. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So that can be a little frustrating if you get caught off guard. But it's near the beginning of the map, so I don't really mind it too much. It's a quick, 2 or 3 minute reset. But the other doors do have valuable items. There's, from gold. I think there's like a couple good weapons in there. There's an unlock staff, I think, something like that. It's not a lot. It's nothing crazy good from what I remember, but still worth picking up all of them. Chad gets a lot of use in this map. And then there's also a recruitable character, but we'll talk about her in just a second. Instead, what we're going to start off with is talking about our 2 new recruited characters. They join automatically at the start of this map. They're not part of the preps menu. You don't have to. They're automatically deployed. You don't have to spend the deployment slot on them. And they are the 2 characters who we met last chapter. So first of all, we have Saul. Saul is a monk? No, not a monk. A priest. Yes, a priest. He's a footlocked healer, kind of like Ellen. Unlike Ellen, though, he starts with sea staves, and that makes all the difference. Saul is one of the most important characters in efficient playthroughs of this game because he is definitely the character who is going to get to A rank staves the fastest, other than characters who join later who have like B or A rank staves already. It's not impossible to get other characters to A rank staves. It's a lot easier with Saul than it is with basically anybody else. So, if you're actually interested in trying to beat this game quickly, you want to get Saul to A staves so that he can use the warp staff. He also has a decent magic base, decent magic growth, so he's not going to be very far behind Ellen, if at all behind Ellen, in terms of his actual magic stat. And then past that, it doesn't really matter. I did mention that he's bishops, which Saul does promote into, the only characters who can use light tomes, but that doesn't really matter, in the grand scheme of things. He's a healer through and through. He's supposed to, use torch and rescue and warp and all these other things. He's a utility unit for sure. I'm still going to stick with Ellen because I like Ellen, but, by all means use Saul instead if you want, or both. If I brought a second healer, it'd probably be Clarine, but doesn't really matter either way, as long as they get the job done. I don't really care about beating the map quickly is the thing. I mean, I'm not warp skipping, so. Alright, and then second of all, we have Dorothy. Dorothy is the second archer that we've gotten for this game. She is just as bad as Walt, maybe actually a little bit more. Her bases are better. Her growth, I don't know exactly what her growth rates are. They're about the same. Like, she's not particularly fast or strong or anything like that. Her main thing is that she just joins, like, a whole 5 chapters later, so there's less time for her to get kills and, grind up against enemies and things like that. It's not really worth using her. Pretty much everything I've said about Wool applies to Dorothy as well. Now, I am going to be using Dorothy. I have never used Dorothy before, but I'm going to be trying to do it. It went okay. She's okay in this chapter on normal mode. She's not like a terrible unit or anything. She's just so mediocre in a game where good combat is definitely not everywhere like it was in Thracia. So there's not really a point to using her unless you really like her or you're doing some kind of challenge run. But yeah, I plan to use Dorothy. Absolutely going to use Dorothy. Looking forward to that, seeing how that goes. A couple turns in, Kath shows up, the girl who warned you about the trap at the beginning of the chapter. She shows up as a red unit, so theoretically you could just kill her. However, she has a portrait, she has a role in the story, so you're going to probably assume that she's recruitable, and you talk to her with Roy. So you go and do that, you talk to her with Roy, there's a talk option and everything, but then she stays red. And that's a little bit weird. Why'd she stay red? Aren't you supposed to recruit her? Is there anything special I need to do? Do I need to talk to her with another character? Like, what do I do? Well, it turns out that you cannot recruit her in this chapter. You need to talk to her here, and then over the course of the game, she appears in a few other chapters, and you need to talk to her 3 times total. The earliest that you can recruit her is chapter 12. Meanwhile, the latest you can recruit her is chapter 23, I think. The basically, if you're not getting the true ending, the final map, which is insanely late. Her base stats don't scale up at all with this, so she's gonna be shit the whole time. I mean, Kath's kind of shit no matter what you do, but maybe if she joined here, she would actually be able to put up a decent fight and get a good amount of experience. But alas, not to be. So I'm not going to talk about Kath right now. I'm going to talk about her when we actually recruit her, but just keep that in mind. I was doing a playthrough once where I decided I wasn't going to recruit Kath, so just for fun, I decided to kill her with Roy, and the animation for, like, Roy likes to stab up, for whatever reason, so when he's fighting a thief in particular, he pokes them, like, right through their face, right through their head. And it was really funny because I just decided, I'll kill Kath, whatever. And Roy crit and did his little, like, fancy dance, and then bam, right through the fucking head. I don't know. It's just a funny image. Hard to explain in words, but you guys know what I'm talking about. It was a good laugh. Okay. Now, I did mention that one of the doors has a recruitable character behind it. This one is a green unit. She is a horseback archer, and you recruit her by talking to her with Roy. Now, she does not have any weapons on her. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. You talk to her with Roy after you unlock the door, and you find out that this is what Wagner was talking about earlier when he mentioned that he had the Silver Wolf's granddaughter. And her name is Sue. She is a nomad, and she is from the plains of Sake, and is the granddaughter of I don't remember if this comes out now or later, but she's the granddaughter of a famous I guess soldier in Sake, or famous. He's like a famous tribe leader, not so much a soldier, but anyway, very, very famous within that realm, so she's pretty well known, or well, her grandfather is, so she's kind of well known by extension. Her recruitment conversation is very basic, nothing really noteworthy about it. When you actually try to use her, she is not good. That's not true. She's alright. So, she is a horseback archer, a nomad. And automatically, we're already off to a much better start, because horseback archers are way better than footlocked archers, just kind of by default. But also, her growths are better, or at least her speed is better. So she's going to be doubling stuff very consistently. Her base speed is pretty good. In the next chapter, there's going to be some enemies that we want to use bows against. So it's going to be worth getting her a bow. Oh yeah, she doesn't join with a bow. You need to give her a bow from somebody. But it's worth it, definitely, if for no other reason than next chapter she's going to be helping out a lot. But, your mileage may vary. I don't like to use Sue very much. I've tried a couple times. It just doesn't really work out for me. She just ends up doing, no damage, and it's not very fun anymore, but you might get some use out of her. I'm not sure. Now, this is very important. I should have mentioned this last episode, but I'm going to mention it now. There is a route split in this game. There's a couple, actually, but there's one route split that comes up later on in the game. And the deciding factor for the route split is the characters who you have given the most experience to. So there are 4 total characters that affect this route split. Shanna is one of them, and another Pegasus Knight. If they have the most experience, then you go to Lycia later in the game. Whereas Sue, and then another nomad we get later, if they have more experience, you go to Sakai instead of Lycia. Now, I plan to play all chapters, so I'm going to be doing both route splits. But the way I'm going to accomplish this is I don't know which way I'm going to go first, but basically, I'm going to be using Shanna long term. I'm not going to be using Sue or the other nomad long term. So as things stand naturally, I would get Lycia. But if I want to go to Sakai, all I would have to do is make sure that Sue gets a little bit of experience, and then kill off Shanna at some point. And then just do Sakai without her, and then load a save state. Because I plan to continue from Lycia, because I want to use Shanna. Now, if you kill a character, then their experience, for the purposes of the formula to get the route split, is 0. So you can just kill off the character if you're worried about going to Sakai. Sakai is considered a lot harder and a lot less fun, so I think most people are nervous about going to Sakai, but most people are going to use Shanna, and most people probably aren't going to use Sue or the other nomad, so I think most people probably are going to end up going to Sakai. Going to Lycia. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that, so if you're interested in going to Sakai, you're going to want to start training Sue now, so that you can make up for lost time. Because Shanna, if you're anything like me, your Shanna is crazy good. She's super over-leveled. She's about to promote in a couple chapters. So you definitely want to get Sue up there if you want any chance of going to Sakai over Lycia. But most people don't anyway. So it's not really a huge deal. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the rest of the chapter basically progresses like normal. Kill the enemies. You kill the boss. The boss is a dark mage, which we've seen plenty of, but this is the first one in this game, so I figured it was worth mentioning. Wagner is his name. I think I mentioned that a couple times. And then you capture the throne, and Roy and co decide to move on to Ostia. Although part of the conversation with Sue happens here, so I'll talk about that now. Sue is the granddaughter of a Sakai chieftain, the Silver Wolf, which I already talked about. Sakai fell to Byrne, at least partially, because Sakai had a traitor. They don't go into a whole lot of detail, but there was some treachery going on in Sakai, which is at least part of the reason why it fell and got taken over by Byrne. Which, obviously there's some parallels here. It seems like Byrne has a pattern of starting to conquer a nation and then relying on the inner strife of the greedy politicians or whatever getting involved and basically the enemy takes themselves down from the inside. Byrne actually has to do very little, which is a smart strategy if you are banking on your opponents being, shitty people, which, I mean, I don't remember what Lycia did, because I know there are like Lycia soldiers that you fight in those chapters, but I think it's mostly. I think it's mostly like Lycia is good for the most part, but I could be wrong. Sue decides to join you long term and invokes, for the first time, we're seeing an invocation of the deities Mother Earth and Father Sky. And that's it. A couple of very, very chapters. They are, honestly, some of the chapters in Fire Emblem the Binding Blade. And genuinely, I cannot think of any chapters that are more chapters in Fire Emblem the Binding Blade than these three. They're just okay. I mean, I don't really have anything to say about them. Real quick map gauntlet, I guess chapter. Oh God, I don't even know. They're also whatever. It's definitely not chapter 6. Chapter 6 takes way too long. Opening the doors and the chest takes a million years. It's just not that fun. So we'll cut that one out right away. Chapter 5, I mean, I do like the fact that it gives you two different ways to approach, but it like one of them is just strictly more boring. So I think it kind of has to go to chapter 4, and chapter 4 is pretty good. So I'm not too stressed about that. And then the previous winner was chapter 2. Yeah, chapter 4 is better than chapter 2. Yeah, I would say that. So chapter 4 is our new reigning champ, and we'll see if that changes next episode, which, by the way, next episode we're going to be doing chapters 7, 8, and 8X. So, yeah, looking forward to that. That's all I got for you in terms of Fire Emblem. So, well, actually, that's not true. In terms of Fire Emblem news, I don't have a lot. The biggest thing, of course, is that Fire Emblem Engage is coming out soon. In fact, very, very soon, the 20th of January, and I'm recording this as I'm sure you guys already know, I'm behind schedule, so I'm actually recording this on the 10th. I might even try to have this edited and uploaded tonight, or like in early tomorrow morning, I guess. But anyway, long story short, Fire Emblem Engage is coming out in 2 days, and I'm very excited. Or 2 days, 10 days, and I'm very excited. Can't wait. I'm gonna be hopping on that shit day one, and I'm gonna play a whole bunch of it. And I've been keeping myself mostly blind. I do know some stuff, but just not a lot. I know some of the character designs, but I'm very curious to see how this progresses, and I'll definitely let you guys know my thoughts on it as I'm playing through it. Yeah, okay. It seems like it's pretty much all Engage stuff, so no qualms with leaving it there for now. But I will keep you guys posted on how Engage is treating me as it comes out. Now, I hoped you guys liked the couple of episodes that I put out in the meantime. Hopefully it tied you over. I know I'm late on getting this one out, but hopefully that'll, I'll get that out very shortly for you guys. Really excited about the bonus episode. I really enjoyed talking about some of the other games that I played this year and kind of doing like a retrospective on that. That was a lot of fun. And the SSS is a kind of an experimental. I feel like I'm kind of jerking myself off a little bit too much with that one. I wanted to try out that style of episode and see if it worked. And honestly, it felt pretty good. It was over a lot quicker than I was expecting it to be. It only lasted, like half an hour, 35 minutes. So, I definitely want to keep doing those, for the supports going forward. And I'm hoping that you guys enjoy them. If you can think of anything that I can do to improve them, just let me know. And I'll try to do that. Because I want you guys to have the best possible listening experience, for sure. Now, I have been playing some video games, and full disclosure, a big part of the reason why this episode is taking longer to get out is because I've been getting real caught up in those games, man. The big one that I played, that I just finished earlier this week, is The Legend of Heroes Trails from Azure, which was the sequel to the game I talked about in the 2022 games episode, the bonus episode. I played that, and I was hooked. Really good. I've already explained kind of how I feel about Trails, so I'm not going to go too into it, but man, I am fully on board the Trails train. I'm hopping on Trails of Cold Steel soon, after I finish Engage for sure. But I definitely want to hop on soon because it seems like it's going to be pretty fun. I know that there's a lot of people who don't like Cold Steel. Some of the things I've heard about Cold Steel make me think that maybe I'm not going to like it either, but I'm definitely going to try it out anyway and hope for the best. And then the only other thing that I've been playing, and I'm actually very close to finishing this one as well, is Celeste. I wanted to play some shorter games in the meantime, while I'm waiting for Engage to come out, and I'll play like another 100-hour JRPG or whatever the fuck. So I've been playing Celeste. I am not good at platformers. So Celeste being like kind of hard, but not really, has been good for me. It's a fair challenge, even just like the base game. I know there's levels there's like extra challenges you can find. Like there's the B sides to levels. There's like extra content that's even harder, and I'm not going to do any of that because I'm not any good at this game. Just getting through the main story has been enough trouble for me. I'm going into the final chapter of the main story, and I'm already almost at 1,000 deaths. So I'm not the best Celeste player in the world, but I'm having a good time with it. The story's really good. I mean, it's very simple, but very cute, very heartwarming. Makes me feel happy. I'm not gonna even really say what it's about because that's kind of a spoiler in and of itself. It's just one of those games you kind of have to experience, even if you're not a big fan of platformers. I would say give this one a shot and just see how you feel. If nothing else, like it's short. I've only been playing it for like a week tops, and I'm already almost done. So it's really not very long. I highly recommend it. All right. Without anything else to say, I think it's about time we wrap up the episode. So I will see you guys next time. We're going to be doing the SSS episode for this one, which is going to include the mercenary characters for Chapter 2. And then after that, the next main episode, as I said, we'll be talking about Chapters 7, 8, and 8X. I might have a surprise for you guys in that one. I'm not going to make any promises, but I'm hoping that I'll have something in store for you guys on that day. But you just have to wait and see. So until then, have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.